So how do you get into a top university while also getting perfect grades in the IB? Hello, everybody. My name is Joaquin Ravello. I'm a current UPenn Wharton dual degree engineering student, and I got a perfect 45 IB in 2021 with exams. So in this video, I'm going to be addressing this question on how to get into your top university while also getting perfect grades, which was a request that I got from a student not too long ago. Now, when we begin to approach this question, we realize that there's actually a better question to ask instead of this question right here. And it's the following. The question really becomes, how do you get into a top university? Because if you get into said top university, the prerequisite of you getting into that, the prerequisite of that statement has to be that you have some level of excellence, some level of high achievement with your academics already. You already have good grades, or else you wouldn't be asking this question to begin with. Now, I'm going to start off by proposing a few answers to that question. The first of which, do you even want to get good grades? Do you even want to get perfect grades? The way it was phrased was do you want to get perfect IB score or perfect IB grade? Because I went through that process myself of getting 45. And while it's definitely possible, and it's definitely possible to get that high grade of 45 while also balancing your extracurriculars, your hobbies, your social life, it's much more challenging than most people want to think. In fact, getting a 45 by itself, many people do it the complete wrong way and they just spend so much hours studying for the exam, so many times reading the textbook, burning their time, studying. And because of that, they spend a lot of time studying and they lose track of all these other aspects that go into getting into a top university and having good social life and having these hobbies and all these other elements that turn you into a high achievement student. So sometimes not wanting to get a perfect 45 score, but instead valuing other aspects of the university admission application can do you more, can help you more and to get into that top university and ultimately achieve this goal. Now, when it comes to answering that question, how do you get into a top university while also getting these good grades, which basically supposes that you're getting to that top university to begin with? The best thing that you can do, and this comes not only with getting to your top university, but also with the IB, also with any other hobbies that you're working with, also with any other goals, is to take it back to the basics. And I think this question, in many ways, and I get these questions a lot by students. So if you were thinking this or you asked this, don't feel like I'm by any means going against you or criticizing you per se. But a lot of students are looking for a quick fix. They're looking for a secret strategy per se. And while I can definitely offer some strategies and some different tactics and some different mindset shifts by which to approach studying and high achievement, it really comes down to understanding the fundamentals, right? You probably already know what those are. You probably already know what are the few dozen things you have to do in order to get into a top university. You already know what are the things you need to do to get high grades in the IB, to just study well, to do well in school. You already know what those things are. All right. And if you don't, you can watch any other video to find out, right? It's basic things such as obviously get good grades, good recommendation letters, have a wow factor, specialize on one thing that your application will stand out on, while also having a small amount of balance with other activities, right? Basic things like that that are just fundamental, but most students are willing to ignore said fundamentals and instead look for a type of hidden strategy, type of secret sauce per se. And I want to challenge you in this video as the big takeaway per se is to really stop looking for these crazy tactics that do not exist and instead focus in on the fundamentals and just get very good at those. Get very good at that. And that might not be the answer you want to hear, right? Maybe you clicked on this video to get some sort of trick on how to combine the IB and university. And I'm telling you right now, as a person who's done that, who's got a 45, who got into my dream university that has an acceptance rate much lower than Harvard. So I believe M&T has like 1%, 2%, something like that. It's crazy. As a person who's gone through that process, I can, through my own experience, I can justify and I can show evidence towards how doing the fundamentals and doing the basics was the real defining characteristic towards my success, right? Did I have some different strategies, different ways to view the world? Absolutely. But what I found was that those different mindset shifts, per se, different ways by which I approached work, really just allowed me to hone in on the fundamentals more, allowed me to hone in on those basics. Okay. And in fact, one of the ways in which I viewed the world, which was different than everyone else, was viewing the world through a lens of how can I master the basics? How can I master the fundamentals? And I believe, and having gone through this process and then helped and tutored students through it as well, I believe that that's where the secret lies. That's where the special tactic lies. The special tactic in getting to a top university while also getting a high grade and balancing all these things together comes in understanding that it's much simpler than you might think. It's easier than you might think, and it takes less effort than most people want to imagine it to be. The reason why it's not happening is because you believe that there is something more complicated towards achieving said lofty and ambitious goal. You believe that there must be something else, some sort of secret strategy. And I'm here to tell you that that secret strategy is understanding that there is no secret strategy. And this is oftentimes why I see some of the smartest people make what I consider to be very poor choices with their time, very poor choices with their priorities. They just try to do too much. They try to overcomplicate it. And you might be a high ambitious student, you might even be getting top marks, or maybe you're not getting top marks, but you're excelling in other parts of your life. It's very likely, and especially with the students I work with, they try to do too much, they try to overcomplicate it, and they forget about the fundamentals. All right, so truly master the fundamentals of getting to a top university, and I promise you the grades will come with that as well, because that is one of the fundamentals, right? So let me answer this from, now that I talked about the fundamentals, there's one more point I want to talk about, so stay through for the rest of the video. And it's going to be about priority seasons. So that's really just another way to view this concept, and it helped me at least manage to get into the top university while also getting good grades. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But I want to really nail down this point of fundamentals because most people really don't understand it. All right. John Wooden, he's one of the greatest basketball coaches ever, and some consider him to be the best coach of any sport in all of history. He ended up winning, I believe it was 7 titles, and he had an 88 win game streak at one point in his career, which is absolutely incredible. Long story short, he did something that seemed unusual in the first day of class, and I really want to nail this point down to show how important it is to get these fundamentals down. All right, he made the athletes take off their shoes, take off their socks, then put their socks back on and put their shoes back on. He spent an entire hour teaching the athletes. And again, these are the best athletes of, I believe it was UCLA, of his school that they were competing against. These were the best athletes. And he had them for an hour take off their sock, put in their sock, put in their shoe. You tie it this way, you sock, it rolls this way, you put it in, you push it down, you pull it up, you put the shoe back in. He did it for an entire hour. And I think he did it to make a few points. The first of which was, no matter how strong you are, if you end up getting blisters on your feet, and you can actually see the interview, I'll link it in the description down below, but if you end up getting blisters on your feet, you will lose. If you end up slipping because your socks aren't tied well, you're going to lose points. You're going to slip, you're going to lose, and that could have a cascading effect, right? You could lose your confidence, and then who knows how many points that ends up losing. Number 3, if there's some pain or something or some sort of discomfort, you're also going to lose. So I think that's the number 1 point, that if you really don't master this fundamental, there's serious chance that you're going to have problems in the future with your game. I think the second point he also wanted to make with that story, with that lecture, was that it doesn't matter how good you think you are. You still need to understand the things that will make you successful. And this is something a lot of successful people fall into. They think that since they've already achieved a level of success, they've already achieved, maybe especially happens with students that I work with who've already gotten high grades. They think that they're going to keep getting high grades forever. And by thinking that, they end up not doing the things that ended up getting them the high grades to begin with. So in other words, they stop doing the fundamental things that allowed them to get those high grades. So the point he's trying to make with the shoes, I think this is the biggest point, is that it doesn't matter how successful you are right now. But it doesn't matter how successful you are right now, but if you stop doing the things that made you successful, if you stop doing the fundamentals that are key, that are important, you're going to lose, right? You're going to lose. So master those fundamentals. What are the fundamentals for you? Proper study, proper productivity flow session, right? We talk about flow sprint sessions, getting to a state of flow. That's fundamental. Doing work without distraction. That's fundamental. Planning your priorities, planning your week. That's fundamental. All these fundamental things that seem basic, that if I just straight up go up to someone and tell them, they probably say that they do them, but most people do not. And if you do, most people don't do them as well as they possibly can. And I promise you, if you are to nail down these fundamentals that I just mentioned, right? Productivity, study routine, priorities, planning, focus, distractions, if you were to just nail those down and do those as well and with a degree of excellence to the best of your ability that you possibly can, I promise you your world will change. And yeah, I mention my grandpa sometimes. I really learned this from my grandpa. And I'm not going to get into a story right now, but if you've seen some of my other videos, you know where I'm coming from. My grandpa ended up teaching a lot of these lessons and really just focus on those fundamentals and understand that success is much simpler than you think. In fact, I remember reading somewhere that the universe is built on very simple principles. Right? The universe itself is actually relatively simple. We're built on very simple principles, right? On atomics, on atoms, on simple building blocks. But when you build these building blocks and then you start building upon the simplicity and fundamentals, that's where you get complicated systems, at least systems that appear complicated, that end up giving you complicated results. So, in other words, when you master these fundamental skills that you already know, studying well, being productive, you build up that base that then allows you to compound that success to more complicated systems. All right. And just if you don't know what these simple things are, ask your counselor. They're going to tell you, oh, well, to get into top university, you need to have a good recommendation letter. You need to have a good set of extracurriculars. Make sure that your extracurriculars are as good as they can possibly be. It sounds very simple, sounds very fundamental. It sounds kind of dumb when I say it like that. But most students try to do something complicated. They try to add a lot of different things to it. But I'm telling you right now, focus in on the simple things. And through that alone, it'll be extremely easy, based on my experience, to get into that top university while also getting good grades. Now, let's tie this back specifically to the IB. And before I do that, I'm going to tell you an Easter egg. And I have these Easter eggs throughout my videos where essentially there are secret codes that you type into the link in the description down below. And I give you a resource that you can use to study this content or learn as however you might be. The Easter egg code that I have for you today is Grizzly Grind 28. So uppercase G, Grizzly, uppercase G, Grind 28. All as one word, no spaces, with uppercase G and uppercase G right in the middle. All right, so Grizzly Grind 28. Type that into the link down below. I believe it's grizzly.com/Easter egg. The link is in the description. Type that in, and you're going to get a resource, that an infographic or a video, something of that sort that helps you learn this content. All right, so now let's tie this back specifically to the IB. Now that you learn the fundamentals, right, how can we make sure you master and get the most out of your time applying to university while also studying specifically for the IB? And the following is what I want you to remember. There are certain seasons towards work. I like to call them priority seasons. All right, certain times or certain seasons or periods of time in which your priorities may differ, right? For example, when you start off in the IB, there really isn't that much at stake, right? This is the first September to December of your first year of the IB. There really isn't that much at stake. There aren't many IAs. The tests don't really matter towards your mocks. So during that time, and this is what I did, I went almost all in on two things. Number one, learning the fundamentals of the course. So these are the basic building blocks, right? For instance, again, we talk about the fundamentals. For instance, in physics, it was really understanding the IA structure, really understanding the scientific method, really understanding how to solve IB questions. You can do the same thing with math. With literature, for instance, you can learn about the fundamentals of the essay, and then you can actually turn that into a habit. And you'll be surprised at how much you'll achieve if you habify that method of creating essays effectively, right? That's number one. And then number two, the second thing you want to do during the season, and the thing that I did the most, was go all in on my wow factor, right? By the end of that season, you want to make sure you have a very strong wow factor to show to the university. And again, how is this building upon the fundamentals? Well, one of the fundamentals of university admission success is you have an extracurricular that stands out from the rest, right? You have an extracurricular that shoots you up. I like to call it the wow factor. Make sure you have that. And if you're not, and if let's say you're going into the summer right now, you haven't worked on your wow factor, the summer is the perfect season by which to do that. You have no obligations, you have no IB work, you only have a period of time by which to work on your most important wow factor, right? Your most important extracurricular. And then the next season, so we talked about from September to December, there's also different seasons such as mock season, there's the extended essay season, there's the actual application season before the IB, or excuse me, before I sent my early decision application. So that was September to November. During that season, that season was the craziest. So I was also doing IAs while applying for university. So what I would suggest is make it a season before that, maybe month of August. Make that a separate season where you only write application essays. I remember during that season, I ended up writing 30 something application essays, and that saved me a lot of time and ultimately made the essays extremely high quality because I was able to review them consistently. And it takes time to write high quality essays. Again, fundamentals. Essays are a fundamental. You need to make sure you get those nailed down. Making make your voice, how to express that effectively to the admissions officer. That is a fundamental skill. Now, think of the IB in terms of season. It should be pretty intuitive. What's most important, what's not most important. And ultimately, one of the biggest things that I did was avoid multitasking. All right. And by multitasking, I mean multitasking on a macro level, not multitasking as in trying to do two things at the same time while sitting down to do work. Obviously, never do that. But I say multitasking as a macro level because that's very easy for people to fall into. And what exactly do I mean by that? Let's say in a given day, I have IB work to do, and then I also have an extracurricular wow factor to do. This is a case of what I like to call multitasking. You're trying to do the IB schoolwork, and you're also trying to do your wow factor extra co-curricular during the same day, right? You're multitasking. You're doing two tasks in the same day. Instead, what leads to much better results is when you focus in on only one thing per day. And I remember reading this from a billionaire where the only thing he did per day was one. He only did one thing every single day. Meaning, let's say he went to work on Monday, he would only work on one project, one task, one big thing, but one thing during that entire day. And then the next day he would work on another or maybe even the same big thing. I challenge you to do the same. One day, only do your extracurricular. So maybe that's a Saturday. Only do your extracurricular. Don't do anything else. Spend the entire day working on your most important wow factor. Right? You'll be surprised at the level of flow and the level of focus you'll be able to gain simply by doing that one thing. And then on another day, do only IB or do only academic work or do only math, right? There's been days where the only thing I did was math. I did math the entire day. And then I did physics the entire day. And then some other days where I only did IB work. So maybe I did a little bit of literature, and then a little bit of economics. And I did that all during one day. All right, chunking your time up like this, it makes it very easy for you to reach what I like to call states of flow. And the research calls that as well, which allows you to get so much more done. All right, so keep that in mind. Priority seasons when it comes to the IB are extremely important. And then ultimately focusing in on the fundamentals and utilizing the Easter egg code that I showed you earlier on. Again, that's Grizzgrind 28, G uppercase in the middle, Grizzgrind 28. There's a very special resource for you in the link down below. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions at all, you can shoot me a message in the comment section down below. I read all my comments and I try to get to them as fast as I possibly can. Or you can also shoot me an email at JqR@wharton.upenn.edu. If you have any other questions, let me know there, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Have a good rest of the day and stay productive.